Hello, and welcome to the Go Far Fast show. This is our second episode of the series. We're really excited to have you join us again today. We will be kicking off yet again with a fantastic guest and a great set of questions. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to join in the conversation or take it further afterwards. Massive thanks again to our sponsor, the National Enterprise Network, who make all of this possible. And I'm back with my favourite finance buddy, the guy who knows all the questions, QB Labs poster child. Aaron, it's great to be co-hosting with you again today.
Thanks, Merle. And she's the fabulous Merle, the founder of Ferlio, which is the essential small business legal aid, who is fighting the big fight. Leave no small business behind, which I'm sure you will all agree is a fight we're fighting for.
Yeah, there's a lot of us fighting that fight right now today, Aaron, but thank you. Something we feel deeply passionate about. And as someone who knows all about the challenges of cash flow, he really is the finance guru that you guys want to turn to, head of accounting at Boffix too. So we're kicking off with a great theme of these times, the future of retail, how we rediscover confidence and ambition in the retail sector, how our consumer habits may perhaps have been permanently changed by what we've all experienced recently. And what does that mean? If you're in retail, what does that mean?
That's right, Merle. And really, when we talk about retail, we're not just going to be talking about retail in the sense of brick and mortar, but we're going to look at also the online ecosystem as well and how that could be affected. So it's our pleasure to tell us or to introduce our guest for today, the one and only Chris Brook-Carter, who is the expert in the retail. He's the CAO of retailTRUST, which is a leading charity and wellbeing organisation for the UK real industry. We really want to look forward to asking him some questions today about how retail has been affected.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the things that I really love about what Chris is going to share with us this morning is that it all comes down to people. I think when we talk about retail, Aaron, we think about platforms and bricks and mortar and statistics and fashion and food and all the sort of, things that we read about in the magazine. But ultimately, this sector comes down to people. It is the biggest private sector employer of people across the UK. And so when you look at it like that, you can see just how much rests on this sector being successful, remaining ambitious, keeping up with change and innovation. So same format as we've been following so far. A few questions for us to Chris, and then we'll keep up with all the questions that our producers have been collecting amongst you, our small business community, and we're going to put them to Chris too. So let's see if he's up for it, right, Aaron?
Definitely, Merle. So let's not keep the audience waiting any longer and get our expert guest on the line ASAP. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Aaron. Hi, Merle. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks ever so much for having me today. I'm Chris Brook-Carter, as you said, Chief Executive of retailTRUST, which is the largest charity within the retail space, looking after the well-being of the 4 million or so people who work in this sector in one form or another. I've been in retail or covering retail as a journalist before joining the trust for about 20 years in one form or another. So very much part and parcel of the industry.
Awesome. And I think it's those journalistic skills that we definitely want to patch into today as well, Chris. So thanks again from me. So very first question we have for you today is, COVID's been a massive challenge for retail, clearly, especially high street retail. And things might not return to normal for quite some time, if ever. So what sort of future do you think we should expect for retail? Big question.
So a huge question. And if I knew the answer, I'm sure everyone would be clamoring at my door. But I think the one thing to say is that we're not going to be returning to anything that like what we've seen as normal in the past. I think that the industry has changed forever over the last 6 months. the changes that we've been seeing in the sector for the last sort of 10 or 20 years, really, since Amazon launched back in the early 2000s, have been accelerated massively over in the last 6 months. So people are talking about 5 or 6 years of change in the space of 12 weeks or so, which is extraordinary, really. I think that the shape of the industry is going to depend very much on what part of the industry that you're in. Some areas of retail have done much better than others. Some have suffered in a greater way. I think the fashion industry in particular has been hugely hit, and we wait and see whether it regains any semblance of the shape it had beforehand. We're buying less clothes. There are fewer occasions to be going out at the moment. So people are really reevaluating, what they need from their fashion retailers. So that's a sector that's been very hard impacted. Grocery has obviously done much better. And hats off to the grocers for the incredible way that they've navigated through this crisis. And I think really ensured that the country has remained fed and people could still get their food, particularly the way that they've responded, I think, to the most those at the most at risk as well. I think there'll be an enormous change in the way that the sector is shaped with regards to geography. You can see in some of the recovery over the last couple of months that it is not uniform. It's happening at different paces depending on different locations. City centres in particular are being very hard hit because people just simply aren't returning to the offices. And, you go into London, for example, and footfall is down there very considerably and sales just simply are not recovering at all. I think we're looking at them at about 30% of where they were this time last year. But actually out more in the suburbs, outside of the city centres, sales have recovered better. So I think, again, we're going to see a big shift. There's some of those trends stick. People not returning to work, people returning, staying and working at home more. We're going to see retailers actually reassessing where they've got their stores in particular. And then, of course, there's online. And I don't think we can ignore the fact that online penetration has shot up over the last 3 months. Speaking to some retail chief executives, they're talking about the penetration of their own sales going from something like 30% to 60% of their overall sales in the space of 3 months. Now, that's caused problems of its own because not every retailer is set up or has the infrastructure to deal with that sort of demand. And a lot of the work that's being done over the last few months has been simply trying to cope with the level of online demand that they're now getting. But I think that that trend is here to stay. I think we're all converted to shopping online. Parcels arriving at our front door has been one of the highlights for many people during lockdown. But again, look, it'll be different depending on the different sectors. There'll be some sectors for whom that'll work better. I think in grocery, whilst online shopping has spiked, I think that the store will remain very key.
Wow, I mean, there's such hard-hitting facts there, isn't there? There's so many bits there that we've got to consider. And I think at times like this where we are so focused on COVID and we're so kind of looking to make sure how the impact of COVID is, it was really interesting. You kind of reminded us that retail was already in a difficult place before this happened. And the fact that we're still, COVID's just basically accelerated their issues, accelerated their problem. And I think that's something we really would like to kind of go on to. But you did mention about location as well. You mentioned about how different aspects of the UK are handling it differently. So should retailers that are very location orientated adapt to online propositions to survive?
Well, no, not necessarily. I think it depends on your customer base and what you're selling. And as I say, retail, particularly over the last 20 years, with the advent of the major marketplaces such as Amazon, relevance and understanding your customers become more and more important. And when you look back pre-COVID at the businesses that have struggled or have gone over, and there have been some very high-profile brands from Woolworths to BHS that are sadly no longer on our high street. Relevance has been the sort of key driver in their demise or lack of relevance in the modern world. And that very much remains the case. And so understanding your customer, making sure that you've got a relevant proposition, both in terms of the product that you are providing them, the way that you communicate with them, but importantly also the channels that you are using to let them shop with you, are the sort of critical factors of whether people will survive now as they were pre-COVID. It's just that I think that the stakes are higher now. So if your customers are online, if that's where they're shopping for your products, then absolutely, you should be looking at a digital solution. But if your customers are local, if they are shopping for that kind of product near their house, then local stores remain very relevant, and local high streets remain a very relevant channel to be using, I think.
I guess it comes down, doesn't it, to the data again, Chris, is really taking a hard look at what's happening in your retail business, what's selling, what's not selling, where it's selling, maybe where other people are scoring, successes that you might not be. But it's not just about the money, and the money is always going to tell you whether something's successful, but that might not track out fast enough. It's really about watching the data and spotting the changes and the preferences if they're happening, because all of this is playing out so quickly, isn't it?
It is. It's playing out incredibly quickly, and I think that's what I mean by the stakes have increased now. You can't afford to understand your customer, and that there are successes. There are people getting it right. You've seen this week that Gymshark, the gym clothing brand that no one had heard of a few years ago, has just been valued at over $1 billion. And that's a business that has absolutely spotted a niche. It's understood its customer base. It's delivered product in a way that its customers want, and it's marketed to those people brilliantly. So there are opportunities in retail still, and there are opportunities for small businesses to become big ones.
Yeah, let's talk about something also that has affected the industry quite significantly, and that's the COVID secure guidelines. And I think for bricks and mortar retailers, this is probably one of the biggest areas of challenge, isn't it? If you want the footfall back, you want to get people in store and browsing and being inspired by what you're laying out and trying to entice them with. I mean, the regulations make it quite difficult to do that, and they make it quite, I guess, a challenging environment for the staff within them as well. I mean, we talked about there being something like 4.5 million people employed in retail. Many of those, if they're involved in bricks and mortar, are going to have to be going through the sort of the screens, the mask, the hand sanitizer, the distancing, maybe making appointments for customers so you can manage how many people come in and still give them a great experience. I mean, how are you seeing all of this play out? Because it is a massive challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, look, like everyone else, ultimately, we want people to be safe. And the measures that I think that are in place are really important to do that. And it's really important also that those people that are staffing those stores, look, going back to your original point, retail is a business about people. And it's critical that colleagues within stores feel that they're working in a safe environment. And indeed, in DCs and warehouses up and down the country, they all need to feel like they have the confidence that they're going into work and feeling safe. So I think these measures are necessary. And I would encourage those in the public to be very empathetic of the fact that retailers are doing their very best at the moment. These are really trying times, and people who are working in stores 6 months ago would never have dreamed that they would have to become experts in health and safety in this kind of way. And they've had to learn new skills and new ways to adapt, whether it's cleaning trolleys, constantly cleaning the stores, ensuring and policing whether people have got face masks on, managing queues, these sorts of things. It has added a level of complexity into running a store that would have been unimaginable only 12 months ago. Individual retailers and individual stores are going to make mistakes. Individual people are going to make mistakes. This is a very fluid environment. And I think one of the things that has shocked and saddened me a little bit is the rise in abuse within stores over the COVID period towards shop staff. And I would encourage everybody who's going into stores to be very patient and very empathetic with how difficult an environment this is to run a store right at the moment. But absolutely, it is affecting footfall. There are still those, very understandably, who are not confident yet in going back into stores. we've already said, store staff are having to manage the volume of customers within stores at one point in time. So it is dampening footfall and it is dampening demand. But I can't see that changing anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it twice there, confidence, didn't you? And I think that's going to be such a crucial element to the retail industry going forward. We've got to find ways to make sure people do feel confident, they do feel safe, and they do feel like it's a place that they could come along. And that really is going to be, the element that we've got to fight together with, and as consumers, as the retail industry itself, we've got to find that line where we can all feel confident and we can all carry on utilising retail as it should be. So with that, then, what support is available from the Retail Trust to help the sector survive in times like this?
So we fundamentally believe that the health of a workforce is inextricably linked to the wealth that is created by the retailer. It's proven time and time again that a happy, healthy, fit workforce, colleagues within your business is one of the key pillars of a successful business, and being more productive and people, loving what they do, loving the brands, and you get a better response from your customers like that. It's just all inextricably linked together. So we are trying to create a coalition of businesses and leaders who recognise that and want to put the health, the happiness, the diversity, the inclusion of their workforce is right at the centre of their retail strategies. And we support the industry, by telling that story, but secondly, actually by providing a number of services that look after the well-being and the health of colleagues, whether it's their mental, financial, vocational or physical health. And I'd encourage everyone in the sector to come and look at the work that we're doing, supporting the industry and the industry's colleagues like that.
One more question before we get to our wider audience questions, and it really relates again to support, and that's the effectiveness of the government's relief schemes. Looked at with a retail sector lens on how effective do you think these schemes have been? Have they gone far enough? Could more be done? And if so, what more could be done?
So, look, I think you could always argue that, very passionate about retail, you could always argue that you'd want to have seen more, but largely I think that the measures taken by the Chancellor have been pretty good. I think that they've undoubtedly propped up the economy. I think the furlough scheme has been great, the rate holiday has been great. More could be done. Undoubtedly, what I think that we'd like to see, and I know that the BRC and the rest of the industry would like to see, is some sort of relook at the rate system going forward in the long term, because I don't think it's right, and I think it does penalise people quite heavily. I don't think an online tax is the right thing to do, because you'd be taxing the one area that is growing across the sector at the moment, and it wouldn't be an Amazon tax, which I know some people believe it would be. It would penalise almost every retailer now that has got a growing online channels. But something needs to be done around business rates and reducing the burden on retailers to actually operate their stores.
Yeah, I hear. I think that was incredibly well said. Right, folks, it's time for your questions. So we're going to put them to Chris now. Aaron, if it's all right with you, I'll take first dibs and then hand you the baton. So the first question is, Chris, selling online hasn't been something that I've invested in much, and I'm not sure how to get a website that I can sell from. What's your advice? Am I better just selling directly from Facebook or Instagram? Do I need a website to do that?
Well, I think we're going to come back to this time and time again with these questions, but you've got to know your customer. There's no point in heading over to Facebook or Instagram if your customer base is not there. Likewise, there's no point in building a store if people are not wanting to buy that sort of product in that location. So I think it's really important that you understand your customer. If you've not sold online before, then perhaps look into one of the marketplaces, such as Amazon or eBay or Wish or something like that, would be a good first start. There's, many successful businesses have started out in those on those channels, and those businesses do offer small businesses quite a lot of technical support and expertise and marketing support to get themselves going. So that might be a first. That might be a first step, but without really understanding your customer, I think it's very difficult to make those decisions correctly.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, isn't it? Because we're talking about using these marketplaces that I think people forget about, that are designed for small businesses as well as your average consumer, so your eBays and everything else. They have so much marketing potential, like you said, and they have so much infrastructure and so much already built in that really they are the best place to start out with. You don't have to invest thousands and thousands into a website. You can utilize these solutions that are already there. So our next big question that's come through, and thank you again for everyone who sent these questions in. I was furloughed for a few months, and now I've been laid off from my job as a shop manager. I think I've got a good business idea that I'd like to get started, but I'm nervous about whether I stand a chance and launching and selling anything right now. How can I get help? Any investors are invested even interested in the fashion retail sector? Where can I go to find out some more?
So I think fashion is a very difficult area at the moment, but it's not to say that there aren't brands that are not being successful. There's been big spikes in those clothes that are more around homeware. The gym kit has been well received and gone through the roof at the moment. Again, look, research is absolutely essential in understanding whether you're going to get this right. Do you know your customer base? Who are you trying to sell to? Is there a need for that product? How do they want to be communicated with? What channels are they going down? There are resources out there that you can go to find that sort of stuff. I would encourage you to look at. I think again, Amazon, eBay, these are good places to test product on. They do have good support for small businesses to sell through them as well. But it's all about understanding the customer. There are investors out there. I think they're quite wary of fashion at the moment because it's such a difficult space. But if you have got the right proposition and you can demonstrate that you do understand your customer and you are meeting a need that is genuinely there, then there are still opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I mean, folks, the Business Planning 101 guide on Farilio will answer a lot of these questions, will help you answer a lot of these questions that Chris is pulling out right now. Because I think it does all come down to knowing your customer and having that rigorous plan that you've properly validated. I mean, if you've put the right foundations in, then you should have good prospects. But as you say, pick a sector where your idea is either going to fly because it's truly unique in that sector at a time when that sector is struggling, or you're not in a sector that is actually struggling. And I think that is really good advice. Let's dig a bit deeper into that question, if we may, Chris, with the next audience question. So this is, where can I go to find out what customers really want? So this leads on quite nicely from what we were just talking about. I'm trying to predict where the best demand is going to be, but it's super hard. And none of the brands I normally benchmark our business against seem to be getting it right either. Is it just that customers aren't buying, or are they only buying certain products right now?
So consumer demand is absolutely is below where anyone would want it right now. Consumer confidence, understandably, is taking an enormous hit. But customers are buying. There are in certain products, and that you look at certain retailers in certain categories at the moment, whether it's DIY or as I've mentioned before, gym wear or lounge wear, and those categories are doing extremely well. So it's difficult for me to say without actually understanding what the category is that this person has asked the question to give advice on. But as I say, if you understand your customer and you know what the need is, then you can be successful, and that you will then be able to go and research and find other people in your space that are probably doing well. I would suggest if no one is doing well in this space, then right at the moment it's probably not a great time to launch into that segment at the moment, because undoubtedly demand is down, and a lot of these questions seem to be coming from potential fashion retailers. And that is a sector that has been hit enormously. People just aren't buying clothes. We're just not going out. So the opportunities to buy clothes have changed. Then you add in I think a change in mind shift about fast fashion and whether it's good for the planet, good for the environment. You see what the news headlines of what's going on in Leicester at the moment around potential slave labour, even in the UK. And I think it's making people reassess their fashion choices entirely and whether or not they've just simply got enough clothes in their wardrobe already.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating watching this play out. We talked about whether, certain habits may be permanently changed. And I think how we buy fashion may well be one of those areas that does change. It feels like the world has got smaller and shrunk as well in terms of, what sells and what doesn't and where the opportunities lie. I think, to me anyway.
Well, certainly at the moment, yeah. Look, people are buying only the things that are relevant to them right now, and people's lives have got smaller. The vast majority of us haven't left our home offices for 6 months, so our worlds have got smaller, and therefore the things that we need have shrunk. Now, what that would look like in a year's time is very difficult to say.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Especially when we're talking about the world, and I think sometimes we forget. In like you said, we're so confined in our own spaces at the moment. We don't leave our houses, and we almost forget about what's happening in the world itself and what is going on and everything that comes with that. And you've just mentioned about the fact that it's not just going to be our retail industry that's going to be affected, but it's going to be all the manufacturing and everything else that goes with it, because we're not consuming as much, and there's going to be a knock-on effect that we're going to have to prepare ourselves for and be prepared to fight that as well when it comes down to it. And when we're talking about kind of the world in general and how the world is, I know it's hard to remember, but back in January, the big question on everyone's lips and the big talking point was Brexit. And it seems like a world away that we were talking about Brexit. And we've had this great question come in from one of the community, and it says, I'm worried about Brexit on top of COVID-19. We import some of the products we sell, and we also have distribution in Europe and the USA. At the start of the year, we are planning on expanding, but I'm not sure we can cope with the most costs and more paperwork and delays right now, especially after having to lay off 20% of our staff last month. It doesn't feel like the government is at all focused on Brexit and what this means for the retailers. I'm really worried about the kind of future we're looking at and whether I should just try to sell up and get out. I'm not sure anyone would buy my business right now, though.
No, I mean, that's a very sad story, and the Brexit undoubtedly has been pushed to the back of the agenda. You're hardly hearing about it in the news pages, but it is going to be a huge logistical challenge for retailers when the borders close. And I think the industry is rightly very concerned about what will happen, what supply chains will look like next year, and how they'll get goods into the country. I'm afraid I don't have anything more positive than that to say about it. It will be an enormous challenge on top of an already very difficult situation.
Yeah, it is very, very tough. I've got another question from our audience. One of the last questions from you guys today, but it's on that similar theme as well, Chris. So I get a lot of our stock from abroad. We sell specialist foods and fragrances. This is getting more and more unsustainable with the virus situation and with Brexit not far off either. Should I adopt a more locally sourced strategy? So the equivalent products in the UK seem to be a lot more expensive, and I'm also finding that competing for local supply is getting really hard. What do you think about local sourcing as a strategy?
I think local sourcing is fantastic. I think it supports local communities and local economies. I would think that it probably, whether it's the right thing to do, comes down to your customer base. A lot of people have done extremely well marketing the fact that their brands and their products are sourced within the UK. Obviously, it's easier to control your supply chain. You've got a smaller carbon footprint probably as a result of sourcing locally, and it might potentially, yes, it could be more expensive with regards to just sourcing the goods, but there should obviously be savings around transportation. But it could also allow you to lift prices because you can market in a different way. You can leverage the fact that there's a sort of UK heritage to your product. But it would be difficult for me to say without actually understanding exactly what the product is. But there are opportunities of to lift the pricing considerably as a result of being locally sourced and UK made. So that might be an option.
Chris, that's really insightful. And I think you're right. I think consumers at the moment, we've changed our habits, haven't we? We've seen restraints to the way in which we have had stuff that's been taken away from us. Like we've had restraints in being able to buy stuff at the supermarket and everything else. And I think that has kind of led people to look at more locally sourced, not just a source of products, but actually go into more locally sourced retailers. So they're going to the local butchers more and everything like that. So hopefully if we kind of continue that trend, maybe or hopefully we'll be less reliant on exports coming into the UK anyway, because we'll be utilising some of our UK-based goods.
Yeah, and it goes back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, that local retail is going to come back. People are not travelling to work anymore in the same ways, in the same numbers that they used to, but they're still going to need goods, and so local businesses, local shops, butchers, as you say, greengrocers, the newsagents, convenience stores around the corner. These are all areas that I think are going to see a much better recovery from the current situation than big stores within the city centre. So it does open up opportunities tied to the fact that people are therefore going to enjoy supporting their local community. So I don't think it's just simply about sourcing goods necessarily in the UK, but if your customer base is a very local one, having goods sourced in that locality, clearly marketed, and leveraging the story and the narrative that you can bring out in that it could be potentially very powerful.
Oh, that's great news. That's great news. And it's nice to kind of finish on a positive note as well, isn't it? And that's something that we really do want to kind of emphasise on. So finally, Chris, your last question of this grilling for today. One of the community members has asked, one thing that's clear from many of the questions we've looked at is that retailers want somewhere to turn for information, guidance, and also reassurance. Where should they turn?
So I guess I'm biased of 10 years at Retail Week, which is the sort of trade magazine, and I still think it's the best source of information with regards to what's going on in the retail sector. Great stories, great case studies, lots of data, and it's truly a champion of the retail sector as well in terms of highlighting the good news stories and the examples of where things are going well. So I would encourage you to take out a subscription to Retail Week. I think organisations like the BRC, British Retail Consortium, and BIRA, which is the Independent Retail Association, are great. And again, a very strong believer that the recovery of retail is pivotal to the recovery of the whole of the UK economy. And one of the ongoing frustrations for me is that the story of how powerful retail it is, what a fabulous job it does is in employing so many people, particularly young people. It's often the first place that people get their very first job in. That story is not told better or more strongly, and it's not heard more by those in Westminster as well. So I think it's really important that organisations like Retail Week, like BRC, like the retailTRUST are seen as ecosystems that everyone in retail should join, because actually collectively and together we've got a much more powerful voice and therefore can affect change for the better for the sector, which in the long term will be for the better of the whole UK economy and society.
Yeah, without doubt. And I really, I'd emphasise that as well. I come from a small retail background. My first job, like you said, was in small retail. I was a small butcher. And I really do think that people learn so much from that industry. There's so much that can be learned and shared and life experience that can be gained. That you're right. We need to be singing it. And here in the show, we talk a lot about leave no small business behind. And really, for us, retail industry is one of those industries that just cannot be left behind.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, you used a word that we feel very passionately about too, the power of the ecosystem. I think this is all about ecosystem. No one of us individually is going to nail this on our own, but collectively with the right resources, with the right guidance, with, retailTRUST, ERA and the consortium, we've got a chance actually of staying on top of the data, of making sure that we really do know our customers. I mean, if there's one overriding message from today, it's know your customers, really look at what they're doing, how they're buying, when they're buying, whether you fit into today's immediate buying habits, and make sure you're addressing them more than anything. Chris Brook-Carter, that was phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing all of those nuggets of wisdom and the data and the insights and the terrific empathy that you have for this sector and the people within it. It's truly inspiring. Folks, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, send in more of your questions. We are going to be going through these episodes on themes that are really important to the people of these times, as well as the businesses that surround them and that employ them. Aaron, another great session today. It's been such a joy to interview Chris, hasn't it?
It's been brilliant. Chris, you've been an absolute star on today. Thank you very much.
It's really kind of you all.
Awesome. Well, we have another successful interrogation under our belts. If you want to send in questions, you want to like, comment, and subscribe, don't forget, check out the hashtag #GoFarFast. That's what the show does. We'll get you, our wonderful small businesses, to the places you need to be with the answers that you need to get there fast. Until then, it's bye from us for now.